Alright, welcome back you guys. This is going to be a video talking about semester 2 homework number 9. Hopefully you guys are enjoying your spring break, and if you're watching this after spring break, I hope you had a good spring break. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So this gave you two not completed class files that you had to work based off what the PSVM gave you and what a few of the basic methods gave you to complete both of the classes and have it run without changing the PSVM. So that kind of thing is pretty common on the AP test for the free response questions. They will give you incomplete methods, incomplete classes, and expect you to kind of work backwards from what you're given to come up with the class that works as specified. So the two classes you were given were the Gizmo class and the Online Purchase Manager class. And so what I did is I started with the Gizmo class first. So all you were given for the Gizmo was this, and then also this. So basically all you get from this is the name of a couple variables, and based on what they are, you can probably guess, double, string, whatever. This guy was a string, this was a boolean, and this was double. And then so you had to look at kind of the methods to see what methods you need to make, look at the headers to see what they're supposed to do, and then you were given this output down here that by the time you finish working with this class, and if you compiled and ran it, you should get that output. So let me show you what we've got here. So we have, first, I just started with these private variables. So we have cost is e. I'm sorry, my dog is scratching on my door. Hopefully you can't hear it. So hold on. Okay, sorry about that. My dog is very special. Okay, anyways, so like I said, we have these private variables, which we get from the toString method that you're given. And then working with the starter that we're given, here's all the methods that you need. So the constructor has three parameters, the string, boolean, and double, and you just set them to our private variables here. And then it has a bunch of accessor methods like getMaker, isElectronic, getCost, pretty self-explanatory. All you had to do was return the appropriate variable. And then the longest method here was equals. So this one was it returns true if the makers of the two are the same and if they're both actually, I'm just kidding. It returns true if everything is the same. If getMaker is the same, if they're both electronic or both not electronic, and if both their costs are the same. So this one kind of required you to know how to call the methods of the one inside the class and also another one not specifically being referenced. So our parameter was another gizmo, which I just called it A. And then so if getMaker, and because I'm not saying a.getMaker or anything.getMaker, that's this gizmo, that this is the class declaration. And then dot equals a.getMaker, so that's referencing the other one. So it's comparing this gizmo essentially to a, which is another one. And isElectronic equals a.isElectronic, and yes, you can compare booleans. I didn't know if you guys knew that, but this is a valid statement. If they're both true, it returns true, and if they're both false, it also returns true. And then and getCost equals a.getCost. Hopefully that all makes sense. This is a really long if statement, but if every single one of these things returns true, because these are all ands, these are not ors, so they all have to be true, then we return true. And if not, we return false. And again, remember, you don't want to put this return false within an else statement, or else you get an error telling you that there's no return statement, because even though if else confirms that at least something is going to go off, Java doesn't like you having return statements only in if else statements. It likes having one just kind of outside everything, so that if something goes wrong, you do return something and it doesn't break your whole program. And then here's the toString method we were given, that now that we have these private variables will work properly and return the correct variables. So once I had Gizmo working, so I tested it with this starter a couple times and got this output, then we moved on to Online Purchase Manager, which makes use of the Gizmo class. So it made sense to me to have my Gizmo working before I moved on to this, but if you did the other way and that makes sense to you, that's just fine. There was no correct way to do it as long as it makes sense to you. So we got this other starter to work with Online Purchase Manager, and so we have a couple methods here. And then for this one, all you were given was this that I actually had to change because it wasn't working for me, and then get cheapest gizmo by maker, and then the toString, which is not really helpful because we were already given this private variable. So this one I really relied on the starter, much more so than I did for the gizmo. So like I said, I had to change this because my add method kept giving me a runtime error if I didn't have this second part here. Oops, there should only be one of those. But yeah, I don't actually know why, but if I just left it the way that he has it like this, it wouldn't run. So if that was a problem for you too, hopefully you figured it out. And I'm honestly not sure why that happened, but I think it's because this wasn't initiated and then we're like referencing it and it's like, wait, you didn't give it a new statement yet. So we just go ahead and call it a new one up here so that way it's initiated and ready to go. And then here's our constructor. As you can see from the starter, it has no parameters, so we don't actually need to do anything during the constructor. And sometimes even if you have no parameters, you still have to like set things up. And I guess when you create one, I could have put this line inside the constructor. That would have worked too, but I chose to do it this way where I just have my private thing set up this way and then have nothing happens in the constructor because we don't need to set variables or anything. And then, okay, so then I started with the most basic method, which was add. So if we look back at starter, you can see that it has 3 parameters, maker, electronic, and price. It's the same thing as a gizmo. We're creating a gizmo to put into our array list here. So I just have it create a new array list with these parameters in order, and then I just add it to my array list. And it's okay if these method names are the same. Java does know that because purchases is an array list, you're calling obviously the array list method add. Whereas in starter, we would be calling the online purchase manager version of add. So don't worry about that. It knows what you're talking about. And then public int count electronics by maker was another where it would count them if it was the maker specified. But they also had to be electronic, which is specified in the problem statement. So you had to read this all the way through in order to get, because I was looking at this chart and I was like, wait, why is that not why is it returning this way? And then I figured out it's because, oh, they also have to be electronic in order for this to count it. So all we're doing is we have in ants, we're setting it to 0 to start with, and then we're going through all of them with this for loop. And then if purchases.getA, so remember this is the with the square brackets for arrays, for array lists, it's the get method. And yeah, so there's a lot of periods. So we have purchases.getA, which accesses A, which is a gizmo. And then we do .get maker, which returns a string, .equals, which is a string method make. So hopefully this makes sense. This is long, and when you start working with array lists, things like this start happening where you have like 3 periods in a row and you're calling 3 methods to do one thing. And then so all this is doing is comparing, the 2 makers to each other. And then we want to compare, so it's comparing this string to the maker of that one, and then we want to see if it's electronic. And so purchases.getA is electronic, and that will just return our boolean for us. And so remember, if this returns false, everything returns false. So you don't have to say equals true or equals false. You can just call it. And then if both of these are true, we're going to add 1 to ants, and then once we're done counting all these, we're going to return ants. Okay, public boolean has adjacent equal pair. So that's just going through the entire array list and seeing if any of the ones that are next to each other return true from the equals method that we created in Gizmo. Oops. Yeah, this guy. So if we have 2 of them that are next to each other, and if we call this method equals for either of them and it returns true, then we're going to return this true. And this one isn't a count. This is a boolean, so it doesn't matter how many there are. It's just if there's 1, great. If there's 7, also great. It returns the same thing. It returns true. So we're going to start with if purchases.size is less than 2, we're going to return false. That would mean there's either 1 or 0 things in it. It, I think, tells you to do this in the, it specifies this in the problem statement, pretty sure. And then, so if that's the case, we're going to just return false off the bat, and otherwise we're going to move forward with the method. So we have this for loop. We're going to go through the entire thing. I have A starting at 1. There are a couple ways that you could have done this, but this is the way I chose to do it. So I have A at 1, and then I'm going to do if purchases.getA.equals purchases.getA minus 1. So I'm starting with the second element in the array list, and then I'm looking at the one behind it, so to speak. You could have also done this if you had it 0, and then you would do A plus 1, but you'd have to go to A is less than purchases.size minus 1, so that way you don't get index out of balance errors. And then if we find even one, like I said, doesn't matter how many, we're going to return true. And if we get all the way through this for loop and never go into this if statement, which means there are none of them, we're going to return false. And like I said, you have to have a return statement outside of for loops and if statements, otherwise Java gets mad at you. And then you scroll down here. The last method besides the toString that you're given is the get cheapest gizmo by maker. So that's going to look through all the ones that have the specified maker in the parameter, and it's going to find the cheapest one and then return that. So here's something you guys probably haven't seen before. Double min equals integer.max value. So when we've been finding mins thus far, we've been setting the min variable to like 100 or 1,000, but these are kind of products, and like some of them are electronics, so some of those can be pretty expensive, So I set mine to this number. This is a number, and it's the maximum value that a number can be in order for Java to not give you an error. So if I do this and then put +1, my thing will not work. You are not responsible for knowing what this number is. I don't even remember what it is, but it is a huge number. And honestly, I can't think of a circumstance where you would be running something and would accidentally exceed it. But for the purposes of finding, we want to start with a really large value. So I just went ahead and set it to the biggest valuable possible, basically guaranteeing that whatever I'm looking at next will be smaller than that. Because remember, we're finding maxes and mins, which we've been doing since first semester. So hopefully you guys are pretty good at that. And if you're not, I'm going to run through how to do it real quick. So we have this for loop. We're going through the entire thing. A is back to 0 this time. And then if purchases.getA.getMaker.equals maker. So again, we're checking to see if the maker is correct here. And purchases.getA.getCost is less than min, which because of this enormous value I set it to originally, it should be the first time. Then we're going to set min to purchases.getA.getCost. So we're going to go through the whole thing, do this, which as you remember, I've talked about this in earlier videos, we've talked about this in class. That's going to ultimately give us the smallest value possible because this if statement is only activated if our current value of min is too big and it's bigger than one of the other values in the array. And then so after that, we want to return a gizmo. And so we're not just returning the min cost, we want to actually return the gizmo. And I didn't store it in here. So I just have the second for loop. We go through the entire array again. And then when we find it, so if purchases.getb.getCost equals min, we're going to return purchases.getb. And if there's two of them with the same cost, it doesn't matter which one you return. Like, it wasn't specified in there what to do with duplicates, so this is the way I'm handling it. Mine will return the first one in the array, but they're probably the same. The only variance could be if one of them's electronic and the other one's not. And then if we get all the way through this, and we somehow don't have anything, which should realistically never happen, but like if the user puts in a maker that none of the values in our array list have, then I have this failsafe down here which returns null. So like how when we have index of and we tell it to return -1 if we don't find any with that index, this is kind of that, but we can't return -1 because we're not returning a string or an int, we're returning a gizmo. So I'm just telling it don't return anything, just return null, which that's a user error at that point, and if they get a null error in their array list or whatever from their program, that's on them for not using this method correctly. But if I don't have this, then like I said, my return statement is in an if statement, and that will not be it won't compile. And then lastly is just this toString we were given. So I didn't talk about the PSVM much besides using it to work backwards, because really you shouldn't have changed any of this. If you got all this working and then you wanted to mess with some of the values to really test your limits, that's cool. But you really shouldn't have been changing this while you were building it. You should have been using it to work backwards to arrive at a solution that works correctly. So hopefully that all makes sense. There were some seriously long if statements in this one, and working with two classes is something that we don't do all that often. So hopefully this made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments down below, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you.